Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the details that you may need to know in order to be able to sort your data in n8n using a few of the nodes that we have available to us. So we're actually going to be talking about 3 nodes in particular, and I'm going to give an honorable mention to one more. But the 3 that we're talking about today are the if node, the switch node, and the text classifier node. You see, sometimes you need to be able to process your information through your workflow, and you need to make decisions on that data as it's coming through. Sometimes you have different users. If you have different users, you might need some information to go this way or that way, depending on the user. Or sometimes you have different types of data coming in that represent different kinds of activities, different types of knowledge, different types of information that needs to be sorted into its own little bucket. We might use a switch node for that. Or if you have some piece of information coming in, maybe like a big block of text, and you need a little more thinking behind it that a switch node or an if node isn't necessarily able to do, you can use a text classifier node in order to be able to have an AI look at it and make a determination for you. So I just have a simple setup here. I've got a chat node hooked up to an if node, and my if node is set up so that I have is an equal to a string of hello, all right? And I'll go through all that in a second, but if I type in hello, I get back a true value on my if node. Now, let's not worry about any of my other nodes at the moment. My switch is also set up to check for is equal to hello, and so it gave me a true value on the hello branch here. But we're not necessarily going to focus on that. We're looking at the if node. If nodes go one or the other. That's it. They don't have a third option. It's either yes or no, and it's based on the conditions that we set. And so this is as true of a logical if as you can possibly get. If this is whatever this operator says it is compared to this. And so we have different types of operators, and probably the one that you're most likely going to be used, especially if you're new to using automation and n8n, is going to be a string. And the different kinds of strings that you have available to you depend on what the data is that's coming in. So exists or does not exist is all about, is it even there? And I don't mean, is it empty? Like sometimes you might have a spreadsheet that has an empty cell. And so you pull the information from the spreadsheet and it sees the spreadsheet cell and it's empty. Well, it still exists. That cell is still there. It is within the realm of our universe. It's there. But sometimes it's not. So you might have something that comes back as a null value. In that case, it would not exist. That's what null means. All right. Is empty or is not empty is another one that I like to use because it really is helpful, especially when we're dealing with spreadsheets. If you have a cell that is empty, you can set it to is empty, and now it will mark as true. If you set it is not empty, well, then that means there's something in it, and it's looking for something there. It doesn't care what it is. Is there something there? That's all that matters. All right, our other options are is equal to. So if it is equal to the thing that I put in, then I will get back, and I get back the exact same thing on the other side. It is equal to, just like in math. You can also do is not equal to, so it means it's different in some way. So as an example, so if I set this to a capital H hello and I test this, it'll come in the false branch. And it's in the false branch because even though I wrote the word hello over here, it's different. It has a lowercase h, whereas this has a capital H. They're not equal. All right, so let's change that back. Now let's come back and look what else we got. Contains. Contains is another one that I really like to use, especially if you're trying to pull information out of something. So as an example, say you have a URL that is being passed into a bot. And I'll give you an example. I'm one of the agents that I'm currently working on. I put an input in and I might include a URL with it. And as an example, it's if I have graphics that I've made for social media, I might upload them to my Google Drive. And then I can take that Google Drive link and go over to Slack and tell my bot, hey, use this link and go post on social media for me with this link. Well, if I need the bot to recognize that it has that link in it, I might set up an if node that checks whether the post that I made contains, and I might say a part of the URL. It might be like drive.google.com, and that's exactly what I did. So I would set it to contains, and then it would be true because it is there. If I said it does not contain, which is the opposite of contains, then it looks through the whole thing that you give it, whatever the input it gets, and it's looking for the value to not be there at all. And so this works really well if you're giving it a lot of information and you're just looking to pick out one or two things that of data that would make the determination of whether it's going to go true or false, yes or no. All right. So you also have starts with so this is definitely if you might have a file that you want processed properly. Does it start with this particular thing or does not start with? Does it end with or does not end with? That might be if you're looking for a particular file type. So is it a .pdf? Is it a .jpeg? So that's a good way to check that. And then matches regex. I have no idea what that is. I've never tried that one. So I guess we could look it up together. What is regex? Regex. What was it? Matches regex. What does matches regex mean? Does matches regex mean? All right. Matches string searches the specified input string for all occurrences of a regular expression. Okay, so it's looking for whether the code that you have in here is the same code that's coming out on the other side. That's matches regex. All right, your other options are number. So number, you're probably not going to deal with too much if you're dealing with text inputs. You might see this potentially if you're dealing with spreadsheets or if you're dealing with variables that are coming in from, say here on the side. So this over here is not a number. But if I had a session ID with another API come in, it might be coming in as a number. And I very rarely ever use number. This is more for math purposes. If you're processing, say, insurance data, you might set up, is the number over here that was calculated with some sort of code node bigger or less than this node or this number over here? So you can do the same thing, exist, doesn't exist, empty, not empty, equal, not equal to, greater or less than, and then is greater than or equal to or is less than or equal to. So you have your normal number operators. You can also base it on time. So whether the date time exists, whether the date time is empty or not, whether the date time that you've input somehow is equal to a date time that you might be expecting or hoping it's not. And an example of that might be if you build in a calendar app. So it pulls your calendar from Google Calendar, it checks what availability you have. You can use an if node to determine whether or not, the date that you have available is the date that the client is looking to match to. And if they're equal, then it can be true and you might be able to go schedule. And if it's not equal, maybe you go down a different process that then asks the client again, oh, maybe we can reschedule to a different date, right? Is after or is before, that is based on today's date. So you'll give it a date and it's going to check whether it's before or I guess it's not today's date. It's based on a date that you're going to put in. And again, a lot of this is a little bit more advanced. You're probably going to be putting in expressions to determine what that date is that you're looking for before or after. As an example, I have a bot that pulls my emails every single day. And this isn't necessarily an if thing, but it's the same JavaScript. I have run it so that it checks for all of my emails before midnight of today, which would have been like midnight behind me. And it checks for all the emails before then, and it checks for all the emails after midnight of yesterday. And if it catches all the stuff in between that, those are my emails from yesterday, and it gives me my information for all of my emails from yesterday. Same thing. You can either do before or after a date in order to determine whether or not it's true or false. And then is after or equal to or is before or equal to. That's just the same as you might see in math, whether it's today's date or after or today's date or before. All right, we have Boolean. Boolean means true or false. And you might sometimes see it. So it's supposed to look like that, just true or false. If you see it like this with quotes around it, that means it's a string. And if you try to do a Boolean with a string, it's going to break. So let's just check that. And see here we have hello is true. Well, is true, hello and is true is not, it doesn't make sense to it. A string does not make sense. Even if I wrote true here, just true. All right, it gave me an error, problem if node. True is a string but was expecting a Boolean. That's because this input here is a string, and that just means text for all intents and purposes. It's the text that we're putting in. You're not likely going to be dealing too much with true or falses if you're new to automation. If you are, then you should hopefully understand the difference as a Boolean, true and false. Otherwise, I would go with string and just do is equal to if you want it to say the word true. In fact, let's go ahead and erase those quotes. And is true, true equals true, right? But it's not Boolean. And it even looks different in the code when you output it. I don't know if it would look different here because I think it would look the same there, but on the other side, it would be like blue. And that lets you know that we're talking about system language true rather than text true. All right, and then our other option is an array. And an array is a group of things. That's the best way I can put it. An array is a bucket that you have a bunch of different things that are probably very similar in there, although each individual item may be different. So it's the same type of thing in the bucket, and each item in the array they're similar but different. And so we have pretty much all the same modifiers here. You have some length equals, or length is greater than. So that's how many items you have in your bucket. Now the thing about arrays is that this can get kind of weird because you can have arrays within arrays within arrays within arrays, and it's just this big nesting doll that you get all kinds of weird data. Again, if you're starting out in automation, you're probably not dealing with that. But just understand that if you're passing an array through an if node, you need to set it to array, otherwise the if node will break. And all of these apply to all of the other nodes, and I'll discuss them in a minute, but I'm here, I might as well cover it. And an object is a block of things that's not an array, but is in essence kind of like an array. All right, it's a grouping of information that might be different types of information. So I can have the name of a person and their phone number and their address and their email address and all kinds of information related to that person. And all of that together is an object. And so long as it's together, it's an object. If I grab any one of those pieces, say their email address, that email address is probably a string. All right, so an object is a collection of strings and arrays, because you can put arrays in objects. You can also put objects in arrays. And so the data starts stacking up. And once you've been dealing with this long enough, you start dreaming about JSONs, which a lot of this is JSON. It's just what I like to call it just a fancy spreadsheet, even though it doesn't look like a spreadsheet, because I can have here as my session ID, not that I would, I can have an array of session IDs, or I can have an array of objects, which includes the session IDs, and some other item in there might have another object with other arrays in it. And it's just this big old cascading down mess of information that thankfully the computers can understand, because I don't think we would ever be able to. And so that is the if node on kind of the whole. Now that's one condition. So if this, then that, and I sent the word true and is equal to true, it gives me a true value, true branch, meaning yes, they're equal. I can add additional conditions. I can do either and or conditions. So I think this is it's a logical or. It's a logical or, it's not an exclusive or, meaning it has to meet one of the conditions. So it's either we'll set this over here to this equal to the word hello. And so if I run it, it's going to give me true because it meets this criteria here. The top one meets it. The second one didn't. All right. Now, if I come back here and I change this to hello and I send that, and I come back to my if node, it meets my second condition, but not my first condition. Now, if I set this to and I hit test step, I'm going to get false because it's supposed to meet both of them and it failed the first one. All right, and you can add additional conditions. Just be aware that if you do so, you're locked into the type of linking that you have for this logic here, for your logical condition. So if I change it to or, you're going to see this one changes to or as well. Now, something else to be aware of is if you're going to have different kinds of data, if you're not entirely certain about what kind of data it is you're passing, such as maybe it's a number, and you're not sure if the number is coming in as a number or if it's a stringified number. If that's the case, you can click this button down here, convert types when required. And so if it gets a number, but it was expecting a string, so contains, as an example, contains the number. Because it's not a number, it was a string. By having this, it'll convert that number into, it'll convert the number into a string, and it'll allow it to pass through. And there are a few other options where you can ignore certain things. So you can ignore the case of the input. So here I have hello. Let's change this to or again. We're going to change this to capital H. So before I showed you when it was hello with a capital H, it failed because this was equal to, right? When we test it again, and it's going to be true because it ignored the case of either of these. It didn't care how the letters were capitalized or whatnot. It just went ahead and did it. So that is my if node. Now, your next sorting tool that you have within n8n is the switch node. And I really like switch nodes because I have lots of different data coming in, and I like just sending it all over the place. And so with switch nodes, it allows me to make a determination based on what is coming in from the input and send it down different paths depending on what that input was. So as an example, say I have 4 different flavors of ice cream. So I've got vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, and rocky road. All right, and so I could come in here and I could say vanilla, strawberry, as an example, berry, chocolate, and add one more, rocky road. And we grab this over here. And what this switch node is looking for, and let's just go ahead and get my if node out of the way. And we'll put my switch node over here. And don't worry about these output. So I don't really care what they say at the moment. Just turn those off. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say vanilla. I'm going to send that. It's going to go into my switch node here. And it comes out my first item, which is my vanilla path. It's exactly what I wanted. So you can have data coming in that's not just one thing and not end up in only one of 2 paths. You can have it end up in a whole bunch of different paths based on what it is and the expression that you have in order to match it. So here's an example of what I use it for. I will have a switch node when I'm doing my social media posts. I am having my voice command to my bot come in, and it's looking for, so I would have something set to like contains. I'm looking for the word Reddit or the word LinkedIn or the word, Twitter or whatever. And based on what it sees, so here we have a not equals to, and it went down strawberry too, but it only went down the first path. I'll talk about that in a second. With the switch node, I can send it down the correct path based on my command without needing to use an AI bot to read my text and rack up the tokens. Instead, it's just looking for the one word that lets it know to go down the Reddit path, to go down the Twitter path. And then I process it further from there. Now, the point I just made, because I noticed it while I was talking, is that this met the condition as well, because this says is not equal to strawberry. And we see that vanilla is not the same as strawberry. And I don't know if you've ever had ice cream, but vanilla is not the same as strawberry. And so because of that, these are both true. But when we look at our output over here, and when we look over here, only one of our items, or one of our paths, has an item in it. It should have gone down this path too, you would think, right? Like that one was true. Like what happened? There's a switch down here. It's a little toggle under options. You're going to have send data to all matching outputs. You turn that on and test the step. Then you're going to get it in both paths. So there we go. And we see it comes down here just like that. Okay. And so that's pretty much the switch node. It has the same options as the if node. You just determine how you want your data to match up against other data to be able to determine what path it goes down. And you also have the ability to convert types when required. You also have the option of having a fallback output. And so a fallback output, let's just do an extra output. And so we'll come back here and we'll see that it has a fallback output now. It didn't before. And that's for situations where, so maybe someone input, instead of vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, or rocky road, they put something like billion berry swirl. Billion berry swirl, I don't have that on my menu. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, you can send it down a fallback path, which you can then have another process for to take care of that, just in case there's data that comes through that's not quite exactly what you want. And it always is helpful to make sure that you have some sort of fallback opportunities for your data, just so you don't break your bot. All right, now let me go ahead and move on to the next one. So we've done my switch node, I've done my if node. We're now going to do a text classifier node. And this text classifier node, I actually copied from another workflow of mine. Where is it? This one here, that it's the on the go LinkedIn posting bot. What this one does is I put a message into Slack. It determines what I said to it, whether voice or text. It then makes a determination with this text classifier that we're looking at here, whether I'm asking it to draft a post or I'm asking it to submit the post to LinkedIn and actually post it. So if I say something like, let's draft a post on LinkedIn about AI automation, and I send that, the reference node doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is because it has no idea what I'm talking about. It's not hooked up right. So we're going to just put this over here, just like that. Now we test it. And I got draft branch. Well, that makes sense, right? I asked it, let's draft a post on LinkedIn about AI automation. It's exactly what I wanted. Now let's say, let's post that draft to LinkedIn. Now, my bet is it's going to fail, and that's because of the logic in this text classifier, which requires it to have a draft usable by itself to look at in order to say. So we're going to test it, and I got send anyway. That works. I'm going to have to test that now and then go back to my bot because it shouldn't have. Like the logic. Oh, this is just the text classifier. The text classifier, no, it does say it needs to have, it needs to have right here, explicitly says to publish something that is already finished and right here, the previous conversation. So I don't know why it broke, but it did. It sent it down the send path, which is what I was actually hoping it would do, to show you that if I tell it something different, the AI reads my message and then sends it down a different path. And so with text classifiers, you have the ability to input your inputs, and whatever data that you want it to be able to process. What I find when people are having issues with n8n is they forget to actually give the model the information that they want it to process, or they didn't check to make sure that these things were hooked up quite right. All right, the internet is a series of tubes. It needs to be connected right, just like a series of tubes. All right, and so what you get here with the text classifier is you get the option of setting categories. So I have a category called send and a category called draft. We'll see here we have one called send and one called draft. And then we're able to describe what it's supposed to be. And you don't necessarily need anything super complicated. I have something super complicated because the model that I'm using, I really want it to make a good determination. I'm using a slightly higher end model to make this determination. I don't want it to break and send something onto LinkedIn that I wasn't ready to post yet. But you can probably just get away with something like any time the user says post it to LinkedIn. And then over here for draft, anytime the user says to draft something for LinkedIn. All right, just like that, and it'll work. So if I test it again, it'll say send branch. There it is. All right, and then you have a system prompt. You don't need the system prompt. These text classifiers actually come with a system prompt that has it read the description, has it read the category, has it read all the inputs, and make a determination based on all of what it has, which path it's supposed to go down. And so these are helpful for when there isn't an exact variable that's coming in that you're entirely certain is going to be there every single time. So instead of vanilla, rocky road, strawberry, and chocolate, instead, like it could be, hey, let's draft something for Reddit. Well, if I have a path for Instagram, I mean, I don't want it to go down the Instagram path, right? And so that's not a great example. What's a better example for? What's a better example? I use these things everywhere. They're all over my bots, these text classifiers. So not that one, not that one, not that one. It's definitely in RogerBot. I'll come over and show you RogerBot. And I'm working on my new update for RogerBot, so you'll all see him soon enough. But he's a big bot, and he's not done yet. So all these colored sections are where I want data sent. And so I have kind of the same input here that I showed you on my on-the-go LinkedIn one, right? That's kind of the same right there. And what happens, and that's what that was right there. And what happens is I send it to a text classifier that makes a determination whether it's supposed to go into one of these buckets. If it does not belong in one of those buckets, I would have something like this add option when no clear match set. And instead of discard, I might have an extra or other branch. And what I would do is, if it doesn't fit one of these, then I would move on to my next text classifier bot, which makes a determination of whether it's one of those things. And if not, then it moves it to the next one, which makes a determination if it's one of those things, and same on, and just so on and so forth. And so the data that's coming in to these text classifiers may not ever be the same. And that's the cool part about them. So they're not like the switches, they're not like the if nodes, where it has to be one thing or not. With the text classifiers, it could be any amount of information that you give it, that you want it sent down a particular branch that you determine, and it'll be able to figure out whether it matches your idea of where it should be or not. Okay, so those are the three main types of sorting of information on n8n. There are other ways to sort, but these are kind of the main ones that you're going to be using, especially when you're starting out. These will get you really far. The other one that I want to give an honorable mention to is the split out node. And I tried to think of a great example for it for this video, and I just wasn't able to find a data input node that I had in any of my bots that would have worked for this in the right way to show you. But basically, I think of it like this. Remember how I said that you can have objects, which are groups of information within arrays, right? And so you have a bucket and it holds these other buckets, and inside of those are items. If you're doing that, there's times that you need the specific pieces of information that are kind of buried in the bucket inside the bucket. Well, you can't get to it because it's inside of another bucket. And if you want to go get it from your first bucket, you got to pull out the smaller bucket, and then from that you can get your item. That's probably the best way to explain it. When you're doing that, you can take that array and use a split out node in order to break all of the other smaller buckets that's inside of the array into their individual pieces, so that it's not one item coming through, which is the array. It would be each of the objects inside of it, or arrays inside of it, or whatever, however you have the data set up, that can then be classified as an item. So one item would be coming in, and then we might get 10, 20, 100 coming out of those buckets. And with that, or if you want to be even more, cheeky, you can even dig deeper into the buckets and try to grab something from inside of it and break only those items out, and you'd get only those items out. But unfortunately, I didn't have a great example to show you, so that's why it's an honorable mention. And that's it. That's how probably the best explanation I can give for sorting data in n8n in a quick, reasonable fashion, even though this video ended up way longer than I was expecting. So if you found this video helpful, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, share and like the video, because it really does help to get this information out there to those who need it. Also, if you want additional tutorials and how-tos, as well as over 30 different workflows for n8n, ranging from social media posting to a personal assistant to marketing plan generators and more, click the link in the description below to join my free school community. As always, I'm Bradford Carlton. Let's automate your success together.